kloden.
Hvis vi gik ud og undersøgte fisk fra Østersøen, fandt vi DDT. Ænder i Odense Å, så var der DDT i. Og vi fik efterretninger om, at nu kunne man finde DDT på Sydpolen, og det bredte sig alle steder. Og det var hele den der kæde af ukontrollerede spredninger af DDT, som blev til det bærende element i udviklingen af en stor del af miljødebatten.
Although all the admiration I had for DDT, and I still have tremendous admiration for DDT, I recognize that it also had many serious problems and that we could not afford to continue to use DDT in this manner.
Spredningen af DDT bliver stoppet i den vestlige verden, men DDT-æraen er på ingen måde slut. Produktionen kører videre på en række fabrikker i Europa og USA, der omstiller sig til nye markeder, verdens fattige lande. Efter at malaria næsten var udryddet i mange ulande, begynder sygdommen at sprede sig igen. Og DDT er fortsat deres vigtigste våben mod den frygtede sygdom. Ulandene fortsætter også med at bruge DDT til at bekæmpe skadedyr i landbruget. Mange tusinder tons sprøjtes ud over afgrøderne. Helt legalt. Men en række ulande kommer under pres. I stigende omfang bliver deres eksportvarer, for eksempel kaffebønner fra Brasilien, afvist af de vestlige lande. DDT-koncentrationerne er for høje. Og nu finder man også de første tegn på massiv DDT-forurening i ulandene.
Så opdager man jo i 80'erne, i hele det nordindiske fladeland, at der er forurening med DDT i det, der er deres miljøsystemer og deres økologiske systemer ved at brede sig. Og på samme måde i det centrale Afrika, at der er DDT-forurening og forurening med DDT-lignende stoffer nu bredt sig og udviklet sig til helt samme niveau som det, vi kendte 30 år tidligere fra Clear Lake i Kalifornien eller fra Østersøen i det Nordeuropa.
Ved den store Kariba-sø i Zimbabwe konstaterer myndighederne, at brugen af DDT har voldsomme konsekvenser for dyrelivet og fiskeriet i området.
We got the most highly contaminated environment in the world. We're applying DDT at the rate of 96% of what the Americans did during their heyday. And we believe that we will lose up to 20 species of birds of prey, fish eagles, peregrine falcons, black sparrowhawks, cormorants, herons. We will lose a very large fishing industry, and Lake Kariba is likely to become the dead lake of Africa.
Det er altså lykkedes også i de industrialiserede lande at standse den anvendelse af nogle kemiske stoffer. Men vi har roligt, og måske endda med egen økonomisk fortjeneste, set på, at den udvikling, vi kendte til, og som vi var bekymret over, at den er altså lige så stille overført til og har udviklet sig lige så dramatisk i den tredje verdens lande.
I slutningen af 80'erne og begyndelsen af 90'erne forbyder en lang række ulande brugen af DDT i landbruget. Men selvom DDT nu kun må bruges til sygdomsbekæmpelse, finder det alligevel vej til afgrøderne og fødevarene. I det sydlige Bangladesh bringer lokale fiskere hvert år tusinder af tons fisk ind, som tørres. Tørfisk er en af de vigtigste fødevarer med animalsk protein i landet. For at beskytte fiskene mod insektangreb sprøjtes de med pesticider. I 1995 undersøger myndighederne indholdet af DDT i fiskene. Resultatet af undersøgelsen er alarmerende. Nogle af fiskene indeholder op mod 100 gange den tilladte værdi. Også i dag finder man for høje værdier af DDT.
We have collected some sample and we have analyzed in our laboratory, and we have found some samples contain high concentration of the DDT and its metabolites.
Indien producerer årligt ca. 5.000 tons DDT, der udelukkende er bestemt for bekæmpelse af malariamyg. Giften opbevares på lagre, der kontrolleres af myndighederne. Men også i Indien kan bønderne skaffe sig DDT til deres marker, selvom det har været forbudt i landbruget siden 1989.
तो ये DDT कहाँ से खरीदी जाती है?
ये बाजार से खरीद लें, ब्लॉक में भी आ जा, बाजार से दुकानदार से भी ले लें।
जो गवर्नमेंट है वो कहती है कि जैसे अब DDT ना खेतों में के लिए मिलती नहीं है,
हाँ।
तो आप लोगों को कैसे मिल जाती है?
मिल जा कहीं दुकानदार पर जान पहचान की वजह से मिल जा, ब्लॉक में नहीं बंद होगी, ब्लॉक में वो दवाई बहुत।
DDT is being diverted to agriculture in many instances where it is coming directly in contact with food items. You go anywhere, you can find DDT in the open market. So obviously it has been stolen and being sold. There is no way to control this kind of practices in developing countries.
Den fortsatte ulovlige brug af DDT i landbruget er årsagen til, at inderne har et højt indhold af DDT i kroppen. Børn er særlig udsat for høje DDT-værdier.
When I tested milk samples, the breast milk samples, I saw that the amount of DDT which child is consuming is 42 times higher than the acceptable daily intake recommended by WHO. So this is a matter of grave concern because children are being exposed and one does not know what response they will show.
I mange andre lande end Indien får spædbørn for store mængder DDT i sig gennem modermælken. Det sker i lande som Vietnam, Zimbabwe, Sydafrika og Mexico. I 1996 tester et forskerhold mere end 50 mexikanske børn, der var hyppigt udsat for sprøjtemidler. Børnene sammenlignes med en kontrolgruppe af børn, som bor i højlandet, og som derfor kun har været i begrænset kontakt med sprøjtemidler.
The children that were exposed to a lot of pesticides did much poorer overall. I looked at play behaviors, things like jumping, catching a ball. They had problems with this, couldn't remember things, had a difficult time drawing a picture. They were just lost in how to draw a picture of a person, even though they were 4 and 5 years old.
Como tú quieras, es una persona ahí. Como lo que tú quieras ponerle, hacerle, ¿ok? Lo que tú quieras.
This is 2 drawings done by 4-year-olds who come from the lesser exposed group. And you can see they're fairly complete people in a sense. At least you have the idea of a head, legs, over here, arms, and some facial features. In contrast to the children who were heavily exposed, at the same age, they were making random scribbles on their paper claiming they were people. When we talk about 5-year-olds, the lesser exposed children have advanced in their drawing, making fairly complete pictures of a person, often putting on details such as complete facial details, fingers, toes, and navel. In contrast to the more exposed, or the valley children, again, it's just a step above being a scribble. This child started with the head, put in the eyes, drew the body, and then the legs up in the air. Over here we see just a random drawing, which he claimed, again, was a person.
En iagttagelse er fælles for begge børnegrupper. Begge grupper har været udsat for DDT, der er brugt mod malariamyg i Mexico.
Any child, no matter where they lived, if they were heavily exposed to DDT, tended to do much poorer, particularly in the drawings, than those who were lesser exposed.
Der findes ikke mange steder på jorden, hvor mennesker ikke på et eller andet tidspunkt har været i direkte kontakt med DDT. Siden begyndelsen af 70'erne, hvor giften blev forbudt i det meste af den vestlige verden, er mere end 1 million tons DDT spredt ud over afgrøder og landsbyer i de fattige lande. Et af de meget få steder på kloden, hvor DDT stort set ikke har været brugt, er polarområderne. Men da forskere begynder at undersøge, hvordan DDT og andre miljøgifte spreder sig, gør de nogle overraskende fund.
Well, we see fresh DDT in the Arctic. The answer to that is very simple. Somebody's using DDT. In fact, it's volatile. It moves into the atmosphere wherever you've used it until it reaches a cold place when it condenses down back to the Earth's surface. So DDT will gradually move toward colder regions of the world. And what we assume is that there is a source of DDT either in Russia or further south and east in the air masses that move from Asia over northern Europe, Greenland and ultimately into Canada.
Samtidig er DDT svært nedbrydelig. Det forsvinder ikke af sig selv, selvom årene går. Tværtimod ophobes giften, særligt i de store arktiske pattedyr.
When a DDT molecule is taken up by the smallest organism in the food chain, it's very unlikely that it will then leave the food chain. It will be incorporated in whatever eats that small organism in the food chain and then on up through the food chain, so that the animal at the top of the food chain becomes the collector of every molecule that has been eaten by every animal that has supported it since it was born. That means that you can have levels perhaps 6 million times higher in a top of the level organism in the food chain than you had at the bottom of the food chain.
I slutningen af 80'erne kortlægger forskere flere hundrede inuiters kost og deres belastning af forurenende stoffer på øen Broughton Island, som ligger over polarcirklen.
As the research progressed, quite clear that a whole suite of organochlorines, including DDT, were all present in these food species to an alarming amount. First of all, there was a great deal of shock that an area so remote and far away could be, that the people living there could be exposed to these levels of contaminants in their food, which far exceed exposure in southern areas.
From that report, people were, especially younger generation, were very affected. They even want to stop eating country food that was involved, that had a blubber in it.
We have a very close connection to the land, and we have always had a remarkable respect and partnership with the land and the wildlife and the resources there. So it seems to us very ironic and extremely unfair that we would now be affected by pops coming from far away, something that is not of our doing.
Inuiter i det nordlige polarområde har op mod 10 gange mere DDT i sig end befolkningen i det sydlige Canada, hvor niveauerne svarer mere til USA og Europa.
what health effects are there of the levels of organochlorines such as DDT that are present in the wildlife food as we've been discussing? What are the effects on humans eating, say, 30% of their energy in this food? We don't have an answer to that question.
What kind of a world have we created when the mothers of the world, the mothers of the Arctic, have to think twice about breastfeeding, giving life-giving milk to their babies because of the very contaminants that the mothers of Mexico, for example, need to use to save their babies from malaria and need to use DDTs to save their babies from malaria? But what kind of a world have we created?
Befolkningen i polaregnen er ikke bare opskræmt over, at deres naturgivende fødevarer indeholder høje mængder DDT og andre kemiske stoffer. De er lige så bange for, hvad konsekvenserne kan være. Mange tusind kilometer længere nede på det amerikanske kontinent er en gruppe forskere ved at undersøge alligatorerne ved de store søer i Florida. Forskerne gør nogle chokerende iagttagelser, der skal vise, at man endnu ikke har opdaget den største trussel fra DDT's side.
Most of the eggs that were laid, 50% of the eggs that were laid died. We couldn't attribute that to nest composition or problems like that. And the story came down to being one of possibly contaminants, pesticides.
Det, der i første omgang får forskerne til at mistænke pesticider, er et større udslip fra en nu lukket kemikaliefabrik ved Apopka-søen. Udslippet fandt sted i 1980.
The spill was actually a compound called dicafol, but in it was mixed DDT and its metabolites. When that actually entered the lake, what we in fact had the next 2 years is a dramatic decline in the hatching rate of the eggs. Now, we already had a problem in that lake because 50% of the eggs after they were laid would die, but 50% would hatch. But within 5 or 6 years of that major pesticide spill, we had 95% mortality of the juveniles in that lake. So basically the young population was killed off.
Forskerne ved Universitetet i Florida intensiverer deres undersøgelser, ikke bare af Apopka-søen, der var forurenet af et kemikalieudslip, men også af de andre søer i området. Her konstaterer de nogle helt grundlæggende forstyrrelser i dyrenes forplantningsevne. Flere af hanalligatorerne er tilsyneladende ved at skifte køn.
Male. For this size.
What we started to realize is that not only did we have an egg hatching problem, but we also had males that were feminized. That is, the males had depressed levels of male hormones, like testosterone.
Okay, 6.2.
And they had small penises.
4.05.
So something's wrong. We know that these males are feminized enough that this will in fact affect reproduction. Does it preclude it? That is, does it block reproduction? We don't know. But that's telling us that a whole bunch of other things are wrong. That is not just the penis is smaller. We also have abnormal hormone levels, which are a fifth of normal. So does that mean that they're making normal sperm? No. Are they making normal amounts of sperm? Probably not. But does the population have problems? Yes, the population has some major problems.
Okay, you got it?
Store områder i Florida er tidligere blevet sprøjtet med DDT op gennem 1940'erne, 50'erne og 60'erne. Men stoffet er stadigvæk til stede i miljøet i dag.
So if you go to the water and take a water sample, you don't find DDT. You don't find DDE or DDD, the breakdown products of DDT. But if you actually go and look at the fish or the birds or the alligators living in those lakes, you find these metabolites. They're in their fat, they're in their muscle, they're in their tissues. This is locked up in the food chain.
Guess what? Feel it right there. Just jump. Just rebound.
Oh man, that's sweet.
She's rebound. One right there. She's full of eggs. She's grabbing. There's one right there. One right there. As you can see, I mean, it looks
pretty dramatically different. So either the embryo is not developing very rapidly, or maybe dead.
Hvis mistanken mod DDT eller et af dets nedbrydningsprodukter skal bekræftes, kræver det forsøg i universitetets laboratorier. Kan man få samme resultat?
One of the reasons that we believe that DDT and its metabolites are a major player is that not only do we find elevated levels of DDE and DDD in alligator tissue and alligator eggs and the ovaries and the testis and the blood of alligators, but we've also begun to do experimental studies in the laboratory. So if I expose a developing baby alligator, a little male, to DDE, I will feminize him. I will actually create a system where his testis no longer produces normal amounts of male hormones. It actually almost functions like an ovary. This is an incredible test because we can actually take DDE or DDD, we can incubate it at what should produce a male, but we'll actually end up getting a female. So we now not only have associative data, but we now have experimental evidence in a laboratory where we can actually recreate the problems we see on the problem lakes. This is not a one-lake problem. This isn't even, we believe, a one-state problem. This is a global problem.
Forskere ved den amerikanske miljøstyrelse har for nylig gjort tilsvarende observationer på hanrotter. Når forskerne i laboratoriet udsætter et rottefoster for DDE, bliver den voksne hanrottes kønsorganer misdannet.
The men working at the EPA laboratory in North Carolina, they found that DDE was a powerful anti-androgen, almost as potent as a drug known as flutamide, that is used to chemically castrate men who have prostatic cancer. But here it was 58 years after DDT came on the market that we finally have discovered one of its most powerful mechanisms of action. We know now when DDT or DDE is present when the sperm enters the egg in a developing animal, a chick, a bird, a human being, that it can interfere with the development of that particular individual. From the moment the sperm enters the egg, development is under control of hormones. DDE and DDT interfere with these natural hormones the body produces, the embryo produces. It tells it how to develop. This is extremely important, so it can interfere with the hormones that actually control sexual development, the development of the reproductive tract, the development of, say, the future of that particular individual.
I begyndelsen af 1990'erne indsamler et forskerhold fra Rigshospitalet i København gennem 3 år oplysninger om den menneskelige forplantningsevne. Resultaterne er opsigtsvækkende. Det gennemsnitlige antal sædceller i mænds sædvæske er halveret i løbet af de sidste 50 år. I samme periode stiger antallet af tilfælde af testikelkræft markant. Endelig kan forskerholdet observere en stigning i antallet af nyfødte drenge med misdannelser i kønsorganerne. Samme mønster som forskerne fandt hos alligatorerne i Florida.
DDT'en holdt jo op med at bruge for 30 år siden. Er det det, der slår igennem i dag? Det er vi nødt til at mistænke. Nogle af de skader og nogle af de sygdomme, vi i dag oplever, kan have været forårsaget af vores kemiske stoffer, som vi brugte for 30 år siden og forbød for 30 år siden. Som for eksempel, når vi taler om testikelkræft, faldende sædkvalitet, brystkræft, der udvikler sig hos unge mennesker eller midaldrende mennesker, fordi de har været påvirket i fostertilstand. Jamen, hvad er det for ting, vi har sat i gang?